Hi, my name is Katie Hodges, and welcome to my podcast. I am so excited about filming this episode right now. I'm really nervous because I worked really hard on putting these ideas together in the way that they make sense to me. So, here we go. Disclaimer, this is only my second episode, and I am trying to figure out my setup. So I made a lot of notes for this. So there will be times where I'll be reading off some stuff that I've written because my memory for all the facts and quotes and stuff just isn't there yet. So I also have set up like a little whiteboard for myself. So we'll see what happens. Thanks for joining me. Thanks for giving me your time, and hopefully there's something of value for you here. Okay, so this episode is trailing off the some of the stuff I brought up in the first episode. So I had talked about shame and imposter syndrome. So right now I'm going to be kind of breaking down like my self-discovery of what those things are and how they affect us and why they're important, and also how they're all connected for me in my journey, at least. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to read, which I'm also terrible at, so I'm going to have to get good at reading out loud. Okay, so imposter syndrome is a cognitive disorder. The condition of feeling anxious and not experiencing success internally despite being high performing in external objective ways. So basically, it's like when you still feel not good enough, when you still feel like an imposter or a phony, despite actually having proof to the contrary. So if you set a big goal and you work super hard and you achieve that big goal, so you have all the proof in your action that you did what you said you were going to do, that you looked at your goals, that you set a plan, that you worked towards it and achieved it. And yet you still feel like, you know, like you don't deserve it, or like you're not good enough, or something like that. So it's just an interesting concept, but I didn't think it applied to me because I don't particularly feel like an imposter because I don't feel like I've really accomplished anything. So because I hadn't set a lot of goals and worked for them and achieved them, I didn't have that end result feeling to analyze. So I still thought it was a really interesting concept, and I just felt like there was something there that could play to some of the pieces that I'm thinking of now. So we'll get into some of it. So here's some quotes from a journal, which I'm going to, all of the references I make, I'm going to uh, cite them in the comments. So there'll be links, there'll be people and their socials, and where to find them if I quote them. There'll be, some articles and stuff like that. So if you guys want to, get into this more, or if you hear something you really like, I'm going to do my best to write everything down and cite it in the description, so you guys can look that stuff up there. Humility and caution stems from an accurate assessment of one's own capabilities against a complex situation. Imposter phenomenon comes from a sense of inadequacy in the environment despite being objectively competent. So I see this as an assessment of self. The problem is that you're not comparing yourself to the real metrics. You're comparing yourself to some made up metrics in your head. So that was really interesting to me because, okay, if we're comparing ourselves, because this is a self-assessment, why are we not comparing ourselves to the proof? Why are we not comparing ourselves to the competence that we clearly display? Why are we comparing ourselves to a standard that is not actually reality. So then it gets all into like mindset and why we think the way we think and evolutionary psychology. And anything that gets into that immediately has my attention. So the characteristics are self-doubt, which is a lack of self-worth, and self-efficacy, resulted in persistent feelings of anxiety regarding their ability to succeed. Another characteristic is sabotaging self-success. Imposter syndrome reinforces feelings of inefficacy, and it pushes people to go out of their way to make poor and risky decisions. There's also setting unrealistic expectations and continuous fear of not living up to expectations. All of those hit me so hard. I don't think in the moment that I set unrealistic expectations for myself, but I know that what expectations I do set for myself, I take it really hard if I don't meet them. And sometimes I don't try to the best of my ability because I have that continuous fear of not being good enough. I would say most of my life has been spent waiting, waiting for the right moment, waiting to be good enough to do the thing, like waiting to have enough work in the dark to be good enough to present it in the light and share it with the world. There's this great quote that I'll paraphrase from Alex Hormozi where it's like, he says, with 20 hours of like deliberate practice, anybody can get 100 times better at anything. The problem is it takes them 10 years or forever to start that first hour. Oh my God, that hit me. I procrastinate and delay what I want to do because I don't believe in myself and I really don't feel good enough or qualified. And also there's like a huge fear of putting something out there or trying something and failing. And I would say one of the greatest mindset changes that I had that literally started this whole journey of changing my life and just really changing myself came from like deciding that was okay, that I didn't care if I failed or if I fell on my face, as long as I tried and as long as I learned something if I failed. And that gave me so much power. I mean, it lifted a weight off of my shoulders because then I could value myself as a learner and not for the result, which means I could endlessly keep going for bigger and bigger results without losing my enthusiasm. Like Winston Churchill says, success is the ability to move from failure to failure without a lack of enthusiasm. And I couldn't get to the first failure because I never even tried. So, thought that was really interesting. Okay, so there are 5 types of imposter syndrome. I'm not going to go super deep into all of them because I can only make connections with the level that I'm at for things that are like directly related to me. So I apologize if I skip over some stuff that is more you, but that's why I'll be providing links so you guys can do your own research, I heard another great quote, I don't know from where, but it said, research is me search. So it's like every time that I hear about an idea or read it and I'm like, oh my God, that thing hits me. And I start, getting super into it or, going down the rabbit hole, spending hours learning about it. It's because it makes me or gives me the ability to better understand myself. And that shit excites me, like really excites me. I would say like the spark that started this whole journey was I learned something and heard something that somebody else said that immediately made me finally understand what was going on inside my mind and my body and how they were connected and like why. And it just literally like opened up like a breath of fresh air like inside of me. Like I immediately felt changed just from that one piece of knowledge. So it was invaluable. And so I went down that rabbit hole. And the more I learned, like I literally felt myself changing just by learning. And it's so funny because obviously without reinforcing that learning with action and practicing it constantly and working on it, those, realizations or changes won't stay consistent. But they were so transformative that I wanted to learn more. Like I wanted to put work in. Like if I was doing something else, like working or running errands or, even in the shower or sleeping, I was like chomping at the bit to go and learn more about this thing. Like I could not get it off of my mind. So that being said, I'm going to, in my limited knowledge and ability in the beginning here, I'm just going to go through stuff that I understand, which means it's stuff that, I relate to and that makes me understand me. So if I skip over some of these, just for time's sake, nobody wants to listen to me babble on for 3 hours, this early in the game. So, I'm going to go through them for the knowledge that I really think I grasp. Okay, so there's five primary types of imposter syndrome, but then they give a sixth and a seventh that they think should be included, that weren't included in like the original studies. Okay, so the first one is the perfectionist. Must be sure everything is done to perfection. Achieving an outcome or completing a task is never enough. The underlying emotion is losing control. That is me. It's always been me. I have always been a perfectionist, and therefore it takes me an extremely long time to do anything and everything. And it drives me crazy. I don't know why I do it. It's very hard to pattern interrupt when I'm in the middle of it. I really struggle with that. And then even as if I do realize it and I try and pattern interrupt later and break it and just kind of finish the project or the task more quickly and efficiently, even if it's not to perfection, it's really hard once I'm in that mindset and I've already put a certain type of work into something to then break out of it. So I'm trying to break the habit and the cycle altogether before it even starts, which is one of the things I had to get over to start this podcast. So sure, some of us can relate to that one. The Superman / Superwoman thrives on showing off their ability to take on a lot of work in a short period of time. They are willing to work overtime to achieve validation. They're trying to prove they are capable of handling anything. Underlying emotion, fear of free time, and taking time away for personal fulfillment. This is most of the people I know, so it's not me, but I see this all the time, like part of being a great leader is delegating. Part of being a great leader and business owner is not having to do everything yourself all the time forever. It's really hard for people though. I mean, think about it. They started their own business all on their own. They worked to get to where they're at. Chances are in the beginning, they worked multiple roles and had to do everything because there was nobody else to do those jobs, whether because they didn't have anybody who was qualified or they couldn't afford somebody who was qualified. And as you get bigger, it's really hard to let go of that control when you've always been the one who does it. Okay. The natural genius. Pattern of minimal effort. They never have to put in extra effort until they do. Underlying emotion, shame of failing. The soloist resents others and help regardless of the situation. Asking or accepting help can leave them vulnerable to exposing what they don't know or can't do. Underlying emotion, shame of asking for help. The expert feels the compulsive need to have all of the knowledge and experience before even attempting the job. Underlying emotion, fear of inadequacy. This is me. I feel like I'm not good enough constantly, like I'm not qualified because I'm not an expert. So I've wasted so many months, so many years trying to work in the dark, trying to learn something, trying to build something, before even telling my closest friends or family about it. And what happens, and I don't understand why yet, and this is something I'm going to do an episode on as well. What happens is that, there's this huge trend right now for people to go into what they call monk mode, or, to disappear for a year and come back as a whole new person with all these new mindsets and skills and stuff. And what I can say from my own experience, and what a lot of people that I listen to online and podcasts are saying, is that even the people who have done it and they, promote it and they see its benefits and stuff like that, there's something about working in the dark for too long, especially if you're not really a social person like me, especially if you already tend to be kind of introverted, especially if you already tend to be a homebody, that then creates this feel-good cycle for doing the work, but doing it alone. And it becomes really hard to reintegrate back into like a normal life and keep that momentum and enthusiasm, because you only know how to do it alone. Also, if you're not getting a feedback loop for the work that you're doing and the things that you're learning, and you're not getting feedback from the world, there's something in our evolution, in our brains, in our biology that starts to lose that passion for that thing. For some reason, we are wired to be social creatures. I mean, not for some reason. It's thousands, millions of years of evolutionary psychology and evolution in general of, it used to be so dangerous to not be a social creature. I mean, if you were not social, if you isolated, you would die and get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So it's this evolutionary construct. But we don't think about that. We don't think about how our evolution and our biology affects us. So I am no longer going to be the expert, but now that I know this concept, it's so much easier for me to recognize this in my daily life. I can recognize a lot of my shortcomings throughout the day, but if I don't have a name for them, if I don't understand where they come from, or if I can't connect them to anything else in my life, then it's really hard to make it a habit to pattern interrupt that behavior. Because if it doesn't mean anything to you, you're not going to remember it. So giving a name to a lot of these ideas and these terms just allows me to recognize them more easily throughout my day, which then allows me to change them, because awareness is the first step to changing anything. I mean, you can't change what you don't know. Okay. The noticer can't be proud of their work because they immediately notice it's not perfect. They believe they always miss the bar. Underlying emotion, fear of not belonging. This is me so much, I can't even say it. I'm just going to skip to the rest because definitely me. The discounter rationalizes evidence of their own competence or achievement. Underlying emotion, not being enough. Also me. Okay, so that was all 7. Let's talk about shame. Shame. Painful feeling caused by conscious recognition of wrongdoing, regret, or foolish behavior. It can also be called humiliation. To bring shame is disgrace. So, from Scientific American, we feel shame when we violate the social norms we believe in. Shame makes us direct our focus inward and view our entire self in a negative light. There also seems to be a connection between shame proneness, and anxiety disorders, such as social anxiety disorder and generalized anxiety disorder. This makes so much sense for me. I feel shame constantly, and it's different than guilt, which I will go into in a minute. but shame comes from like the inside. It's an attack on yourself. It's viewing your whole self as inadequate or not good enough. And it makes so much sense of why I've had so much trouble in my past with social anxiety in the last few years. You know, growing up, I was a pretty social person. I was always one of those introverted extroverts, and I didn't become like primarily introverted um, until like my late 20s, early 30s. And it's been a massive struggle. And the deeper and deeper I go into it, the more and more I've struggled in social situations. It also makes sense of being a possible cause or contributing to generalized anxiety disorder. Um, they say uh, anxiety comes from the perception of a lack of decisions or freedom. So you feel anxious because you feel like you have no choices in life. I would also say that shame is attacking your self-worth, and the less confident you are, the less self-worth you have, the less self-respect you have, the less you love each other, the more anxious you're going to feel in your life in general. Confidence gives you security. uh, the factors that contribute to self-worth are what make you feel whole, make you happy, make you proud of yourself. And without a lot of those attributes, shame is just fuel for the fire in your mind of all the negative things that you tell yourself when you're by yourself. So now I'm going to go into the difference between shame and guilt, because this was really important for me to define, because I have felt guilty for a lot of things in my life, and it is crippling. But usually, feeling guilty for something can put me in a, you know, like little depression for maybe a few days or weeks, depending on how bad, the thing was, how much it affects my identity and my values. But shame makes you feel helpless. Shame can last months or years, and it's so sneaky you don't even know it's there. It's one of those things where it's easy to recognize that you feel guilty about something. It's really hard to recognize that you live in a perpetual state of shame. It's really important for me to start to understand the differences, because then I can start to understand the solutions. So, read you some stuff that I wrote that I can't remember, so I have to read it off of paper. Okay. Shame and guilt are defined differently. Shame is felt regardless of anyone even knowing your shame or any external punishment, because it feels like a moral failure, and that hits us at the core of who we are. Guilt is usually associated with an action. I did something wrong. I feel guilty because my actions affected someone else. I feel responsible. Shame is crippling. Shame attacks our core values, beliefs, and self-worth as a whole. I would say that in my life, shame has been the leading root of all of my depression. So how do you solve for shame? What cancels out shame? Since shame is a complex feeling stemming from an entire lifetime of conditioning and beliefs and experiences, the solution is also complex. For me, this has worked so far to get me to the point in my ability, and at the very least, these are compelling arguments. So, how I solve for shame is a couple of ideas that really helped me. So, the first one is ownership. Ownership gives me back my power. Then there's mindset, and changing my frame of reference constantly gives me the ability to learn and try without feeling shame. Values and beliefs give me the ability to keep going and make progress. Accountability, grit, and proof give me self-worth and self-respect. So it's this idea that there's a solution for everything. And I'm trying to live in this problem-solving mindset right now because I have felt overwhelmed by my subconscious, by my circumstances, by my emotions for so long. And the only way to get out of that is to find solutions. I spent so much time trying to define the problem. And it ended up making me turn a lot of my anxiety outward, blaming circumstance, blaming people, blaming myself, but in not productive ways. So I want to live in the solution, and it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to be right on what that solution is. It's going to take time to figure out for yourself what actually works, what clicks with you. That's why there's so much information out there and available to all of us, is because so many different things are going to resonate with so many different people. And there's no combination of things that's going to resonate exactly the same for two different individuals. And so if shame sucks so much, why do we feel shame from an evolutionary standpoint? Well, if we didn't contribute to the group, we would die. We'd die of starvation. We would, be an outcast, and, we would get eaten by something. So not being good enough, not performing was a survival tactic, So by giving us this lever in our psychology of shame, nature's goal was to actually make us better people. It was actually giving us that signal that we're not good enough and we're not performing to our potential, that we're not contributing value. So recognizing that it's not a moral failing and that it's simply an evolutionary construct is really valuable. And as long as you have a growth mindset and you are actively looking for these things, you will figure them out. Nobody who genuinely has a willingness to learn learns nothing. So next there's fear. An unpleasant, often strong emotion caused by anticipation or awareness of danger and accompanied by increased autonomic activity. So I think everybody's pretty familiar with fear. So we won't get too into it, but I asked myself, what is your biggest fear currently? And I had a lot, but I'll give you only a few of them. So one of them is living my life exactly as it is for the rest of my life. I'm in a really uncomfortable moment. There's a lot of friction in my life right now because I have this whole new mindset, this whole new perception on myself, on other people, on the world, on what I want. But I also don't have the tools to get there yet. So I'm living with this constant friction of wanting more, wanting to do more, wanting to throw myself into this every hour of every day. But life doesn't give me that opportunity. Life says you have to work. Life says you have to take care of your physical health. Life says you have to do a lot of things. So I'm in this place right now where I'm out of a depression, but I'm sitting with this anxious energy of wanting more. But knowing that not only can I not have it yet, but really starting to recognize just how big my goals and aspirations are for myself. And so with that, one of the scariest things to me would be to never improve and never grow, and to live my life exactly as it is right now for the rest of my life. Just living in this perpetual, like, no man's land of progress. So that also goes to, like, my other biggest fear would be then, and this has always been one of my biggest fears, is looking back and knowing that I didn't live to my potential and didn't do the things I wanted to do. Terrifying. Another fear of mine would be not having kids, not being conscious of the fact that life does have a timeline and that timeline matters, and then missing out on what actually matters. I'm getting older and I have these big goals and ambitions, and I always have, but I always felt like I had time to complete them. Even though I've also always felt like time is running out and like I'm late to the party. And now that I'm in this phase where I'm really defining what I want in my life, and I'm building clarity on what that is, how to achieve it, what I need to do to get there, it's giving me this really incredible motivation. But unfortunately, there's just a reality that I'm in my early 30s, very soon to be in my mid 30s, and there is a biological clock. And so now I have this fear of, I've always wanted to be a mom, and what if I don't get to be that? Or what if my time's already run out? What if I can't have kids and I don't even know it? And I've been waiting my whole life for this thing that may be out of reach and out of my control. So that's scary. And now I have to weigh that with, okay, how do I prioritize my goals versus my life goals? Because you really have to become, like, painfully clear on what your hierarchy of values are, because you need to go down them in the most important to least important order. So now I have to start to arrange those beliefs, so that I don't get stuck living my worst fear, which is not having a family. Next fear: never being good enough, inadequacy, not earning self-respect or stable self-worth. I have always had a huge problem with my self-esteem. I've always had a huge problem with loving myself, respecting myself, valuing myself, thinking I'm worth anything. I have consistently been probably the most insecure person I know for my entire life. And I never knew how to change that. And the reality that I have come to believe is true through everything that I've consumed this year, all the knowledge, all the stories, and as well my own experience, and then putting a lot of that knowledge into action this year and feeling the results. And the only way to get over that and to build self-worth is to have proof that you are who you say you are, and that you're somebody who is accountable. Do you do what you say you're going to do when you do it? That's one of the most important things to me. And it's come to be one of my most important values is accountability. So building self-worth is not easy, but I finally feel like I am living in the solution, like I have a solution. And one of my goals is to build, like, ironclad, completely stable, immovable self-worth. Another fear is not actively or positively affecting or changing the lives of people I care about. I've always been a giver and a people pleaser, and I have always wanted to buy my family houses and do all these big things, and like pay off their debt or take care of them more than myself usually. I mean, I very rarely dream about the house that I want, even though I save about 1,000 of them on Instagram. I'm guilty. What can I say? They're so pretty. But yeah, I actually literally have like looked for houses online on real estate sites that I would want to buy my mom or my dad or something like that. Like, so, and then having a positive effect on the people around me has become really important because as I changed and as I went through my introversion, my depression, stuff like that, I really began to withdraw and my light just completely went out. I used to feel like I had some sort of aura of energy, like a lot of people do. Not everybody has it, but like it could just be funniness, it could be calmness, it could be something, but some people just have these energies that you can feel when you're around them. And that's usually what makes people want to be around them. And I used to feel like I had this really comforting energy. And I completely believe that I've lost that. I don't think that's entirely true. I think that it's just been really hard for me to get out there. And when I realized that I was no longer that person that people could count on, or that shoulder that they could cry on, or the person they would call when they needed advice, it really helped hurt my self-esteem and my identity. And I started to realize that I fear not enriching people's lives, and I fear not providing value for them. So I was thinking about fear, and I came to these little like bullet point conclusions. So fear is a discreditation of belief, a discreditation of value, and a discreditation of identity. So fear is basically, to me, this lever in your head that counteracts what you actually believe about yourself, the value you actually hold, and directly attacks your identity. And I'm talking about fears when it comes to, yourself and stuff like that. I mean, if you have a fear of heights, I don't really think this podcast is going to help you. But I'm at the edge of what I understand and what I know and what is helping me. So it's about as deep as I got. But, maybe someday I'll be some expert on fear of heights, in which case, come back then. Okay, let's talk about limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs are assumptions about yourself and the way the world works, real or imagined. So I see them as perceived absolute truths. So they are what you believe about yourself and what you believe about the world and what you believe about other people. And a lot of the times we don't realize that these beliefs can be changed or taught. It's so interesting. Through this journey, I have discovered so much about reality and each person's perceived reality. So, like, a limiting belief is like me constantly not feeling good enough, you know? So, if my limiting belief is I'm not good enough, now I'm starting to ask myself, like, not good enough compared to what, Not good enough compared to who I was yesterday, not good enough compared to some ideological standard that I never actually stopped to think about what it is or why I think it. We all have our own beliefs predicated on our particular set of experiences that dictates the unique way each of us views the world. These beliefs are formed often without us realizing it, and we believe them to be absolute truths. I don't have a ton of examples on this yet, but I really want people to start to look at this concept, and I'll develop each of these things like more over time. I'm not going to go into fear too much in the future, or shame probably. I feel like we're getting through that, but limiting beliefs are constant. I mean, limiting beliefs will show up in your life for the rest of your life for all time. So they're constantly going to be something that you have to start to measure and either accept or find a solution, like counteract that limiting belief with some sort of proof, and continue to do that until the belief is changed and no longer holds weight. So another one for me is I am terrible at social media. This is going to be a real struggle for me. I literally have written down so many things that I will be sharing as content, and literally out of like a year's worth of writing and researching, I feel like I have absolutely nothing to post. And I was starting to think about this because I also really struggle to post pictures or post myself. It's just super hard for me. I don't really get it. I don't know why. I'm figuring it out. And I started to think like, oh, what if I'm just not a social media person? I don't like social media. Even if I'm not on it, I don't check it. Even if I'm not posting, I don't go on Instagram. I think like last year I didn't go on for like 9 or 10 months. I didn't delete it. I just have no desire, you know? And so I was thinking, what if I'm just not a social media person? What if I just don't like social media? What if I'm just not made for it? It's like, well, even if that were true, how would that serve me? All that belief is doing is limiting me by giving me an excuse. It's saying, oh, you're not a social media person? Fine, don't go on social media. When in reality, if I'm trying to build a community and find experts and talk to people and interview people in the future, and if I'm trying to share knowledge, the reality is social media isn't going anywhere. And what better way to meet new people, to find new experts, to get exposed to new ideas and new frameworks than to have 7 billion people right at your fingertips. I mean, it's an invaluable resource if you're trying to grow a business, or if you're literally just looking to contact almost anybody and ask them a question about almost anything on earth. So instead of just believing, oh, social media is not for me, and letting that be my excuse and my reality, instead, I need to look at the positives, like what can social media do? What is the benefit of social media? How can I overcome these things for myself? So I set up a schedule. I set up a formula of things I want to post and when. And I've given myself a little structure, and literally I made a sheet with check boxes of, okay, did you post this thing of value today? Did you do this thing? So that I can turn that into a habit, and I can start shutting off that belief that I can't do this because it's just not for me. The truth is, anything can be learned. And by allowing your limiting beliefs to control you and to control your circumstances and become excuses, you're really just giving that belief all of your power. And then I was thinking, okay, so when you realize like your limiting beliefs, so for mine, that I'm not good enough, I have a choice to believe it or not. So by simply recognizing that something is a limiting belief gives you power immediately. And then you have a choice. Do you want to take that power? Do you want to use that power? Do you want to let that thing take your power and have control over you? So then I was thinking like, wow, so much can be changed from just awareness. By just having a desire to learn or to know or to grow, and then shining a light on something every single time, it has literally blown my mind, simply because I had the desire to learn it. And the second I have awareness, I almost instantly feel change. Like I'm one of those people who gets that light, gets that spark from an idea. Like when I connect the dots on something that means something to me, oh my gosh, I can live on that high for days. Like, literally, that can get me up out of bed in the morning for an unreasonable amount of time for just having an idea. That's usually someone else's that I then connected to my own experience. So it's not even an original idea. It's crazy. So it gave me this idea that you just have to bring your limiting beliefs to light and combat them with awareness and with purpose and direction. So you just have to figure out what the limiting belief is, recognize how it doesn't serve you, and then figure out what the opposite of that is and how to either use it in a positive way or to create structures and habits that will change how that belief shows up in your life until it eventually doesn't. Okay, so to round it out, what do all these traits, attributes, limiting beliefs attack? They attack your self-worth and they attack your confidence. And I used to be an extremely confident person, and I don't know why, because in reality, I have much more right to be confident now, and I'm probably the least confident I've ever been in my life. So I really wanted to see, like, because I'm living in problem solving mode, how do I build confidence? Confidence is defined as a feeling of self-assurance arising from one's appreciation of one's own abilities or qualities or values. The feeling or beliefs that one can rely on something or someone. So, and I was thinking about this, I was thinking about it as firm trust, which to me comes from accountability and reliability. And then I was thinking back to that energy I used to talk about, that calming energy I felt I had, how I felt it radiate off of me. And I was thinking that really felt like confidence to me. Confidence feels like an energy, like it feels like a state of being. It doesn't feel like a mindset or an emotion to me. I experience it biologically in my body, in my physiology. When I feel really confident, if I feel like I'm on top of the world, if I'm really proud about myself about something, or, I've really been crushing it in the gym or with my health lately, and I just feel so good, I literally feel like my skin vibrates differently. I know it sounds super woo-woo, but it is, to me, it's an energy state. Like, it's a constant state of being that I feel, and it literally makes me feel lighter inside. So I was thinking about some of the things or qualities that really make me feel confident when I have them, and that if I wanted to describe what that confidence looked like from the outside of how it feels as I carried myself, I tried to imagine myself looking at myself when I walk into a room with that confidence. And some of the attributes I kind of came up with were realistic, secure, proven, capable, poised, and composed. Full trust and belief in self-worth, reliability, accountability, and value. A true sense of self. And I thought that was a great start, because confidence for me is something that has to be built, I think the innate confidence we get when we're kids comes a lot from environment, from genetics, from our upbringing. Did we have a good family life, stuff like that. And I think confidence as you get older comes from proof. It comes from skills. It comes from value. And if you don't have those things, if you don't build those things, you start to lose your confidence over time, Okay, so then I looked up and I was doing some research, and I found 2 different articles, and one of them had the 5 C's of confidence and the other one had the 3 C's of confidence. And I won't go into why they said it, but I just thought that these terms were really interesting if you wanted to start to dissect confidence. So I just thought I would share them because I really love vocabulary and terms. And I feel like defining terms or bringing terms to a complex idea allows me to A, break it down, and B, I talk a lot in everything I do about frame of reference. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you guys start to get frustrated and you guys are saying the same thing over and over again, back and forth to each other, chances are you're not arguing about the same thing. Or you're saying the same thing, but you're perceiving it differently. Either one or both of you is perceiving it differently. So by defining terms, it gets rid of any miscommunications, and it's something that I think is really important in all communication, and it's a skill that everybody should learn. To stop, take a step back, and ask somebody, what did you mean by that? Because chances are the answer is going to surprise you. And you're going to be like, oh, I thought you meant this. Oh, that makes sense now. Because when you were saying that, this is what I perceived. And it just makes communication so much more interesting to me, and really puts it in a place of learning instead of being right. Okay, so the first one was the 5 C's, which is communication, clarity, connection, community, and courage. I thought that those were all great. Communication is something that I can't even describe it right now. My brain just went blank because my whole point of starting this podcast was I wanted to communicate deeply with others. And I wanted to learn new ideas and grow and develop them. And I wanted to give myself a tool to do that because I learn things so much better by talking them out verbally or writing them out and constantly cycling through ideas until I connect new dots and understand them deeper. Clarity is something that I have put so much value into lately. I think one of the reasons I was lost in the past was I didn't have clarity on what I really wanted. Connection, I'm starting to also see the importance of, isolating yourself for a year and just working on yourself and growing. You don't realize how important that connection is if you're not naturally a social person. And I'm starting to see that I'm missing that in my life. Without even really knowing that I was wanting for it, I'm just starting to see areas where my life could be better if I had more human connection in it with, people that I care about. Community. I think that this one is really interesting because community can either build you up or it could be a source of why you don't feel confident. A lot of people care a lot about what other people think. But in contrast, if you have a really supportive group around you, it can be an insurmountable tool to helping to raise you up and get you through hard times. So then I started thinking about where does confidence come from? What are some of the things that absolutely make up my confidence and that I can already clearly see are important to me? So, and I started thinking about it. So I wrote, confidence equals calm achieved through competence. Confidence comes from proof. Confidence comes from ownership. Confidence comes from grit and discipline. Confidence comes from accountability. Confidence comes from doing what you say you're going to do, building micro proof. Confidence comes from progress. Tony Robbins says, progress is the foundation of human flourishing. Confidence comes from self-worth and self-respect, which comes from proof and purpose. So then we're going to look at the proof. And there's a perfect quote for this. You don't gain respect for yourself by shouting affirmations in the mirror, but by building an undeniable stack of proof that you are who you say you are. From Alex Hormozi, of course. I was never really a affirmation or the secret kind of person, but I was never really a self-help or positive self person either. But I knew that there was something lacking in my mindset and in the things that I told myself. And the part was the proof. So, how can you say you are who you say you are if you don't have any experiences that prove that you're right? So by working at something, by consistently showing up in the same way for the same thing, whether it's, you know, a value or whether it's an actual task, that is going to prove to you that you are who you say you are because you showed up how you said you would. So, kind of in conclusion, look at what is holding you back. Chances are you are unknowingly believing a bunch of little things that limit you and hold you back, just like I did. When you piece it together, it will literally rock your world. Bettering yourself and growing doesn't work because of any one particular thing, but it always comes from desire. If you have a desire to change, like if you were sitting there right now, like I have for my entire life, wanting to be more, wanting to be better, that desire is all you need to start. You don't need to disappear for a year. You don't need to become the expert. All you have to have is desire and a willingness to learn and get better and a willingness to look at yourself and be honest with yourself. Growing isn't easy and it's not absolute when you make a decision about who you want to be and why you want to be that person and how you're going to do it. Simply making the decision, simply having the desire, having the awareness will not change your behavior definitively and effectively forever and all time. But having a desire is the start. That's all you need. That's why, they say you can't change somebody. You can't help somebody who doesn't want to be helped. I have struggled so much in my life with either people offering me help when I wasn't ready for it or trying to help others when I get excited about this new life that I'm building who just have no desire to live the kind of life that I desire. And it can really get you down, or it can be frustrating because you have all this desire and you haven't taken any action yet because you're waiting for the right time. Just having the desire is the right time to take action. If you have desire, all you have to do is follow it up with doing the thing that you say you're going to do, doing the thing that gets you excited. A desire to change isn't really important if you don't do anything about it. If you don't go out and learn, if you don't go out and start to define these ideas and how they affect you and get excited about something, then the desire is meaningless and it will give you anxiety for the rest of your life because you're not going to do anything about it. So, my goal here and my hope is that we can all just share these ideas and grow and get a little better every day. Because even just by growing and getting a little bit better every day, your world changes dramatically. And all you have to do is be better than the person you were yesterday.